They ignored her for 8 months. Then one forgotten command made the entire room go silent. A prototype jet was already airborne, deep in enemy skies, when everything began to fail.
We're losing the data feed. The waveforms are collapsing, and I can't stabilize the link.
Screens flickered, warnings stacked. Voices rose as officers argued over whose fault it was. She didn't argue, didn't announce herself, didn't even look up. She stepped past a captain who hadn't noticed her standing there and entered a command no one had used in years, not from a checklist, from memory. The alarm stopped, the aircraft stabilized, and that's when the senior analyst slowly removed his headset, not in panic, in disbelief. "Sir," he said quietly to the colonel, "you need to see this." The system log opened. Buried deep inside was the identifier of the person who entered the command. The colonel leaned closer, then froze. According to the archive, that operator was listed as deceased. She stepped back into the corner of the room, invisible again. No explanation, no defense. She hadn't come to be recognized. She came to finish something that never made it into the reports. Before I tell you what happened next, tell us where you're watching from. And if you respect stories like this, hit like, subscribe, and stay right here. Because what happened after this changed the fate of everyone on that flight. The colonel didn't speak right away. He stared at the log as if it might change if he waited long enough. It didn't. He straightened slowly, posture resetting into something harder, quieter. Around him, the room resumed motion, but not the way it had before. Voices dropped, gestures shrank. People moved with the careful restraint of those who know something important has just shifted, and they're not yet sure how. The senior analyst cleared his throat once, softly. "Sir, the command path she used hasn't been active since before the modernization cycle. It predates the current architecture." The colonel nodded without looking away from the screen. "I know." Someone else spoke up, a captain trying to sound confident. "So she got lucky, found an old workaround." "No," the analyst replied, his voice steady but firm. "That sequence isn't documented. It was never released into the field." A pause, then, almost reluctantly, he added, "It was written in-house." The colonel finally turned his head. "By whom?" The analyst hesitated. His fingers hovered over the console, then tapped once more. Another layer opened, more identifiers, more redactions. His voice dropped. "By the same operator the archive says is dead." No one laughed, no one questioned it. They didn't need to, because the jet on the screen was still flying, stable, clean, alive. The colonel exhaled slowly through his nose. "Where is she?" The analyst glanced toward the edge of the room. She stepped back. The colonel followed his gaze. She stood exactly where she'd been standing before any of this began, near the wall, half in shadow, hands loosely folded in front of her, eyes forward, unfocused, as if she were listening to something far away, not watching them, waiting. The colonel took 2 steps in her direction, then stopped himself. He didn't call her name. He didn't ask a question. Instead, he turned back to the room. No one speaks to her, no one acknowledges her, understood? A few officers exchanged looks, confused. "But sir," someone started. "That wasn't a suggestion," the colonel said quietly. The room complied instantly. On the wall display, the aircraft crossed another waypoint. Telemetry held, no anomalies. The mission clock continued counting down as if nothing unusual had occurred. But everything had. Because buried beneath the stabilized data was something else the analyst had noticed and hadn't yet said out loud. The command she'd entered hadn't just corrected a fault, it had rerouted the entire control logic of the system, not around a failure, around a pattern. The analyst leaned closer to his screen, heart rate climbing despite himself. He pulled historical data, stacking it against the live feed. At first glance, nothing stood out. Then he overlaid mission timelines. His breath caught. This wasn't the first time. Over the past 6 months, there had been minor anomalies across unrelated missions, brief signal drops, slight targeting delays, fuel discrepancies small enough to be blamed on noise. All of them corrected, all of them quietly, all of them following the same invisible logic. Someone had been watching, someone had been adjusting outcomes just enough to prevent catastrophe without ever triggering an investigation. The analyst's eyes flicked back to her. She hadn't arrived 8 months ago to learn this base. She'd arrived already knowing it. The colonel returned to the console. "Bring me the logistics cross-feed," he said. A lieutenant complied. Fuel schedules, maintenance cycles, personnel transfers. The colonel scanned them once, twice, then stopped. 62% of current operations staff had passed through the same installation at some point in the last 4 years. Different times, different roles, different reasons. But the overlap was there. And so was something else, a name that appeared just often enough to seem routine, just rarely enough to avoid attention. The colonel felt the weight of it settle in his chest. This wasn't about the aircraft was just the proof. Whatever she had come back to finish, it was still active, and it was closer than anyone in that room wanted to believe. Behind them, the doors opened briefly as another officer entered, unaware of the shift in gravity he'd just walked into. The colonel didn't look up. "Lock this room," he said. "No external calls, no reports up the chain, not yet." He paused. "And someone find out who signed off on her transfer." The analyst hesitated. "Sir, if the archive is right, that operator shouldn't exist." The colonel finally allowed himself a glance back toward the woman in the shadows. "That," he said quietly, "is exactly why she's here." And as the jet continued its mission thousands of miles away, unaware of how close it had come to becoming a footnote, the people in that room began to understand something unsettling. This wasn't a rescue. It was a reckoning. And it had been building quietly, patiently, for years. The colonel stood motionless, hands resting on the edge of the console, eyes fixed on the stabilized telemetry. To anyone walking in now, the room would look normal again, controlled, professional, routine. But the people inside it felt the difference. They were no longer managing a mission. They were standing inside someone else's plan. "Run a deep audit," the colonel said at last. "Yin Lang, I want everything that touched that aircraft, hardware, software, personnel." The analyst didn't move right away. "Sir, that could take days." "Then start with what shouldn't line up," the colonel replied. "And don't tell me when you hit a dead end. Tell me when you find something that's been pretending to be ordinary." The analyst nodded and went to work. Behind them, she remained silent. No shift in posture, no sign of interest, as if this part of the story had already played out exactly as expected. Minutes passed, then the first anomaly surfaced, not in flight control, not in targeting, in logistics. Fuel manifests that didn't quite match burn rates, maintenance logs signed off at odd hours, access credentials that appeared valid, but only during very narrow windows of time. Each discrepancy was small, defensible, forgettable. Taken together, they formed a pattern. Someone had been shaping outcomes without ever touching the center of the system. A lieutenant leaned toward the analyst. "That contractor ID, I've seen it before." "Where?" "Joint Base Archer, 2 years back. They handled comms upgrades after that ISR blackout." The colonel's head snapped up. Archer. He pulled the file instantly. Another base, another incident, another near miss that had been written off as bad luck. And buried inside the resolution report was the same quiet signature. A correction, a reroute, a fix that arrived just in time and was never questioned. The colonel felt his pulse tighten. "Bring up personnel transfers," he said. The analyst complied. Faces scrolled past on the screen. Names, dates, assignments. Then the colonel saw it. A cluster. People who had never served together, yet had all crossed paths within months of each other, different units, different roles, same invisible connective tissue. And every single one of them had access, however briefly, to systems that mattered. The colonel turned slowly toward the woman at the wall. She was still looking straight ahead, not at the screens, not at him, at nothing in particular. "Did you know this would happen?" he asked. The room froze again. She didn't answer right away. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm, measured, unremarkable. "I knew you'd look in the wrong place first." No one reacted. No one dared. The colonel studied her face. "And now?" "Now you're close enough to make mistakes," she said. The analyst swallowed. "Mistakes like tipping them off?" She nodded once. "They already know the aircraft recovered," she continued. "What they don't know is how, or who noticed." A captain frowned. "Who is they?" She didn't answer him. Instead, she took one step forward, not into the center of the room, but just enough that everyone could see her clearly now. "For months," she said, Someone has been siphoning fragments of operational data, not enough to raise alarms, just enough to map response times, weak links, human behavior. The colonel's jaw tightened. A private actor? She met his eyes for the first time. A network, she replied, with friends in uniforms and patience. The analyst glanced at the live feed. The jet's approaching its final phase. If they realize their access is compromised, they won't pull back, she said. They'll accelerate. Silence. The colonel felt the room tip forward, as if the floor itself had shifted. This aircraft, he said carefully, wasn't the target. No, she agreed. It was the test. The implications settled heavily. If this was a test, then what came next wouldn't be subtle. The analyst spoke again, quieter now. There's something else. He brought up a secondary overlay, one the colonel hadn't asked for. Encrypted traffic, burst transmissions, short, masked, recently activated. They lit up 5 minutes after the reroute, the analyst said, and they're moving. Toward where? The colonel asked. The analyst hesitated. Toward us? No alarms sounded. No dramatic countdown appeared on the screen. Just a quiet, unmistakable shift in the data. The woman at the wall exhaled softly. Now, she said, it gets expensive. The colonel turned fully toward her. You've been preparing us for this? I've been preparing me, she replied. You were optional. The honesty landed harder than any accusation. The colonel didn't bristle. He nodded once. Then tell me what you need. She considered him for a moment, long enough to measure something. Not his rank, not his authority, his restraint. You need to slow everything down, she said at last, which is going to feel wrong. The colonel didn't interrupt. Freeze non-essential operations, quietly. No base-wide alerts, no sudden lockdowns. Anything loud tells them they've been seen. The analyst frowned. Sir, if hostile traffic is already converging, they're not hostile yet, she said, and they're curious. Curious was worse. They're checking whether the door they've been using is still open, she continued. If it is, they'll keep walking. If it's closed, they'll try another. And if we shut them all? The colonel asked. She shook her head. Then they burn the house down to see what runs out. The room absorbed that. The colonel turned to the analyst. Do it her way. Yes, sir. Commands rippled quietly through internal channels. Tasks paused, systems idled, redundancies shifted, not enough to be noticeable from the outside. From the inside, it felt like holding your breath. She stepped back again, reclaiming the edge of the room. But now, people were watching her when they thought she wasn't looking. The analyst leaned toward the colonel. Sir, there's something else you should see. He pulled up a layered access map, routes inside routes, permissions stacked like transparent sheets. This wasn't built all at once, the analyst said. It grew. Like a vine, she said from behind them. The analyst nodded. Every entry point looks legitimate in isolation, but together, it's a lattice. The colonel studied the structure. How long? At least 4 years, the analyst replied. Maybe longer. The colonel felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. 4 years meant multiple rotations, multiple commanders, multiple oversight teams. It meant this hadn't survived by being clever. It had survived by being boring. Why not pull the thread earlier? The colonel asked, not turning. Because you can't see a web while you're standing in it, she said. You only feel it when something moves. As if on cue, the analyst stiffened. Sir, he said quietly, encrypted burst just changed pattern. How? They're no longer scanning, he replied. They're listening. The colonel exhaled slowly. They know. They suspect, she corrected, which means they'll probe. The wall display flickered, not a failure, just a blink. A new data stream appeared. The analyst stared at it, disbelief creeping into his voice. That's internal. The colonel's jaw tightened. From where? The analyst checked the routing twice. From a node inside the base. Silence fell again, heavier than before. She closed her eyes briefly. There it is, she said. The colonel turned. The traitor? Not one, she replied. A relay. The analyst swallowed. A person. A function, she said. Someone whose job is to make things pass through unnoticed. The colonel knew the type. Every base had them. People who didn't command, didn't decide, didn't sign. They moved. And movement was everything. "Can you isolate it?" he asked. She shook her head. "Not without tipping them." "Then what?" She opened her eyes. "We let them think they're still in control." The analyst looked up sharply. "You want to feed them false data?" "No," she said. "That's too obvious." She stepped forward again, this time stopping beside the analyst's console. "We give them truth," she continued. "Just not all of it." She typed quickly, fingers precise. A mirrored stream split off the live feed, identical in structure, subtly delayed in timing. The analyst watched, realization dawning. A shadow channel. "They'll follow it," she said, "because it confirms what they already believe." "And what's that?" the colonel asked. "That we're reactive," she replied. "That we don't see the whole board." The analyst's screen pulsed once, then settled. "They took the bait," he whispered. The colonel felt the room exhale, but she didn't relax. "This only buys time," she said. "Minutes, maybe an hour." "For what?" the colonel asked. She glanced at the aircraft feed, now nearing mission completion. "For the part they don't expect," she said. "And what part is that?" She met his eyes again. That the person they erased came back and remembered everything. The aircraft crossed its final waypoint. The analyst announced it quietly. Mission complete, returning to base. No cheers, no release, because now they all understood something critical. The jet had survived, but the real test hadn't even started yet. And somewhere inside the systems they trusted every day, something was already adjusting its plans. The aircraft touched down without incident. Clean approach, smooth deceleration, textbook recovery. If anyone had been watching only the flight line, they would have seen nothing but another successful mission added to the day's ledger. Inside the situation room, no one moved. The analyst kept his eyes on the data streams long after the wheels were down. "They're still connected," he said quietly. "Shadow channels active." "They won't disengage yet," she replied. "They'll want to know why nothing broke." The colonel folded his arms. "And when they realize we're not panicking, they'll test something closer," she said. "Something human." As if summoned by the words, a soft chime sounded from the access console. The analyst frowned. "Personnel query request. Internal." "From where?" the colonel asked. The analyst checked. His expression tightened. "Admin layer. Civilian contractor permissions." The colonel didn't like that. "What are they asking for?" The analyst hesitated. "Duty rosters, shift overlaps. Who was in this room during the anomaly?" The room went very still. "They're narrowing," the analyst said. She nodded. "They always do." The colonel looked at her. "You said they'd accelerate." "They're trying to confirm a hypothesis," she said, "that someone here acted outside expected behavior. And if they confirm it, they'll try to remove the variable." The colonel didn't ask what that meant. Instead, he said, "What would you do if you were them?" She didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice was steady. "I'd create pressure where mistakes are easiest." "Meaning?" "Fatigue, urgency, authority." The colonel glanced around the room. People had been here for hours already. Tension sat heavy on their shoulders. She continued. "They'll provoke a situation where someone higher up feels compelled to override procedure." The analyst's eyes widened slightly. "A false emergency." "Or a real one," she said, "just not the one we're watching." The analyst leaned back. "There's more traffic," he said. "Different signature. This one's dirtier." She stepped closer. "Show me." The screen filled with fragmented packets. Not reconnaissance, not extraction, disruption. "They're poking at support systems," the analyst said. "Power routing, climate control, non-critical, but noticeable," she finished. The lights overhead dimmed briefly, then returned to normal. No alarms, just enough to unsettle. The colonel felt it immediately. "They're watching reactions." "Yes," she said. "They want to see who flinches." Another flicker. This time a soft click echoed through the room as one of the wall displays rebooted. A junior officer shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, should we—" "No," the colonel said sharply, then softened his tone. "Not yet." She nodded in approval. "They're impatient," she said. "That's good." The analyst glanced up. "Good how?" "Impatience makes patterns," she replied, "and patterns can be traced." She moved to an unused console and brought up a fresh visualization. Lines appeared, thin, faint, overlapping. Watch how they touch the system, she said, not where. The analyst leaned in. They're avoiding certain nodes. Yes, she said, nodes that log too much. Meaning they know where oversight exists, the colonel said. Which means they've mapped your governance, she replied. Probably better than you have. That stung, but it rang true. The analyst pointed. There. They just skipped a node that should have been easy access. She smiled faintly for the first time. Not warmth, recognition. That node was rebuilt 3 years ago, she said, after a classified incident. The colonel frowned. Which incident? She didn't answer. Instead, she typed. The skipped node lit up, not with access, but with response. The analyst watched, breath held. You're waking it up. I'm reminding it what it was designed for, she said. A new layer appeared. Passive, observational. What is that? The colonel asked. A witness, she replied. It doesn't interfere, it records behavior. The analyst swallowed. If they notice, they won't, she said, because it doesn't behave like a defense. Another flicker ran through the room. This time, no one reacted. They were learning. The shadow channel pulsed again, faster now, less careful. They're escalating, the analyst said, trying to force a response. And they will, she said, just not from us. The colonel watched her carefully. You said this would make sense later. She met his gaze. It already should. He thought for a moment. Then it clicked. You're not trying to stop them, he said slowly. You're trying to make them show themselves. She nodded once. They think they're invisible, she said. The only way to catch something like that is to let it move. The analyst's console chimed again. This time the alert was different. Not a flicker, not a probe. A handshake. The analyst stared at the screen, fingers frozen above the keys. Sir, this isn't scanning or siphoning. The colonel leaned in. Then what is it? The analyst swallowed. It's requesting confirmation. The room tightened. Confirmation of what? The colonel asked. Authority, the analyst replied. They're trying to validate control, not steal it. She stepped forward before anyone else could speak. They're checking whether the door still belongs to them, she said. If it opens, they move freely. If it doesn't, they burn everything behind it, the colonel finished. She nodded. The analyst pulled up the route. It's coming through the same convergence point, same relay. Can you block it? Someone asked from the back of the room. She shook her head immediately. If we block it, they'll know exactly where we are. Then what? The colonel asked. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she studied the handshake request, the timing, the cadence, the way it mirrored legitimate internal traffic while sitting just a fraction of a second out of sync. They're careful, she said, but they're also arrogant. The analyst frowned. How do you mean? They assume the system will behave the way it always has, she replied. They don't think it can recognize intent. She looked at the colonel. Do you trust your logs? The colonel didn't hesitate. I trust the people who audit them. That's not what I asked, she said. He paused. No, he admitted. Good, she said. Then let's stop pretending the system is neutral. The analyst's eyes widened slightly. I want to answer them, she said, but not as ourselves. Silence. The colonel felt the weight of the moment. If we do that, they'll commit, she finished, fully, because they'll believe they're still invisible. The analyst exhaled slowly. And if you're wrong? She met his eyes. Then they'll shut us out completely. The colonel studied her face. There was no fear there, no excitement either, just certainty. Do it, he said. The analyst nodded once and handed her control. She typed slowly this time, deliberately, each keystroke measured. She didn't mirror their handshake exactly. She improved it. The system responded. Connection established. The room didn't celebrate. They waited. Seconds passed, then the traffic changed. The analyst's voice dropped. They're moving data now, real data. Let them, she said, but watch what they touch. The analyst pulled up a live trace. They're skipping redundancies, going straight for command oversight. The colonel's jaw tightened. They're confident. They think they've been validated, she replied. A new stream opened, then another. The network, long cautious and fragmented, began to flow like something stretching after sleep. They're consolidating, the analyst said, pulling everything into one control layer. The colonel felt a chill. Why would they do that? She answered without hesitation. Because they're about to act. As if on cue, an alert pulsed on a secondary screen. External communication spike, encrypted, high priority. They're coordinating, the analyst said. This isn't maintenance anymore. The colonel looked at her. Is this what you were waiting for? Yes, she said, because now they're no longer hiding. The analyst frowned. Sir, that authority signature, it's escalating privileges. To what level? The colonel asked. The analyst checked, then looked up slowly. Emergency override. The room reacted this time. Chairs shifted, breath caught. Override of what? Someone asked. The analyst's voice was tight. Flight operations, base security, communications. They're trying to assume command, the colonel said. She shook her head. No, they're trying to prove they already have it. The colonel turned to her. How do we stop it? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked at the wall display. Now calm, stable, deceptively normal. By letting them cross a line they can't walk back from, she said. The analyst stared. You want them to fully expose themselves? Yes, she replied, because once they do, they won't be contractors or relays or shadows. They'll be traitors, the colonel said. She nodded. And traitors, she added quietly, leave fingerprints. The analyst hesitated. Sir, if we let them trigger emergency override protocols, they'll have to sign it, the colonel said suddenly. The room turned toward him. He continued, voice steady. Every emergency action requires an authorizing identity, even automated ones. The analyst's eyes widened. And if they do it remotely, the system will still log who claimed responsibility, the colonel finished. She looked at him then. Really looked at him, and for the first time since she'd spoken, there was something like approval in her expression. It vanished just as quickly. Don't mistake alignment for safety, she said. This is the most dangerous moment. The analyst's fingers hovered over the console. They're finalizing the override. The colonel's voice was calm, but his pulse wasn't. If they realize what we've done, they won't, she cut in. Not yet. The system chimed again, a low, deliberate tone, not an alarm, a confirmation, emergency authority accepted. The room felt smaller. The analyst pulled up the authorization chain. Names, timestamps, credentials, everything stacking cleanly, convincingly. Too convincingly. They signed it, he whispered. They didn't spoof it. They used their own credentials. The colonel closed his eyes for a fraction of a second. When he opened them, something in him had hardened. Lock it, he said. Mirror everything. Nothing leaves this room. The analyst complied, hands moving fast now, adrenaline sharpening focus. Mirroring complete. She leaned in. Good. Now watch what they do with it. On the wall display, subsystems began to light up, not all at once, not recklessly, carefully, intelligently. They're not trying to seize control, the analyst said. They're testing reach. They want to know how far they can go before someone notices, she replied, before someone stops them. The colonel folded his arms. And when they realize no one is stopping them, they'll move from access to action, she said. And that's when we end this. Another chime. This one sharper. The analyst's breath caught. Sir, they just issued a restricted directive. To whom? The colonel asked. The analyst checked, then looked up. To a flight crew. The colonel turned sharply to the main display. Which aircraft? The analyst hesitated. A training sortie scheduled for later today. She exhaled slowly. They're escalating the test. Why a training flight? Someone asked. Because it looks harmless, she said. Low scrutiny, high trust. The colonel's jaw tightened. What's the directive? The analyst read it aloud. Mid-flight systems validation. Manual override of guidance assist for 30 seconds. The room went still. That's dangerous, the analyst said, even briefly. Only if you don't know it's coming, she replied. The colonel looked at her. You did? Yes, she said. That's why they picked it. Then they're watching you, the analyst said. She shook her head. They're watching the system. They don't believe people matter. The colonel didn't like that. Do they have eyes on this room? No, she said. If they did, they wouldn't be this bold. Another beat. They're still assuming they're invisible, the analyst said, and we're still letting them believe that, she replied. The colonel paced once, then stopped. If that flight goes up, it will, she said, and it will come back safely. The analyst stared at her. You're sure? I already adjusted the parameters, she replied. The override will execute and fail. The analyst's eyes widened. You sabotaged the sabotage. She shook her head. I constrained it. On the screen, the directive executed. A brief spike, a flicker in the guidance data. Then, nothing. Stability. The training jet continued its course, pilots unaware of how close they'd come to being part of someone else's experiment. The analyst let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. They'll notice. Yes, she said, and when they do, they'll get careless. As if summoned, the shadow channel pulsed again, faster now, less refined. They're reacting, the analyst said, querying logs, backtracking. They're trying to see what changed, she replied. They won't like what they find. The colonel turned to her. How long have you been planning this? She didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was quieter. Since the first time I realized the failures weren't random. The analyst glanced at her. That was before you transferred here, she nodded. Before this base, before this command. The colonel studied her. You could have reported it. Yes, she said, and it would have been buried, reassigned, resolved. And instead, he asked. Instead, I waited, she replied, because some things only surface when they think they've won. The shadow channel spiked again, this time violently. The analyst's hands flew over the console. They're panicking, issuing multiple directives. He stopped. They're trying to erase logs. The colonel's voice dropped. Can they? They're trying, the analyst said. But they can't, she finished, because we already moved the truth. The analyst looked up sharply. Moved it where? She met his eyes. Somewhere they can't reach, and somewhere they won't think to look. The colonel didn't ask where. He didn't need to, because the room had shifted again, not with fear, with momentum. With momentum. The room didn't erupt into celebration. It didn't even relax. Momentum meant exposure. Exposure meant consequences. The analyst's screens filled with confirmation pings, automated acknowledgments rippling outward as oversight systems came online. Independent, external, uninterested in anyone's rank. They're locking the audit window, the analyst said. No local overrides, no discretionary delays. The colonel nodded. Good. Let it run. A few minutes later, security feeds updated, doors opening, footsteps in corridors far from the situation room. They're moving, the analyst said quietly. Internal affairs, 2 floors down. No one asked who they were there for. They already knew. The shadow channel sputtered once more, then went silent. Not cleanly. Fractured. They pulled the plug, the analyst said. Tried to burn the path. And failed, she replied, because they waited too long. The colonel turned toward her. You knew this would end here, she shook her head. I knew it would end. I didn't know where. The colonel studied her face. What made you stay? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked at the wall display, now calm, orderly, almost boring. Because I wanted to be sure, she said. Sure that when it ended cleanly. The analyst glanced between them. Sire, they're detaining the authorizing officer. The colonel closed his eyes briefly. Any resistance? He asked. No, the analyst replied. Just confusion. The colonel exhaled. That might be the hardest part. On the screens, a name disappeared from active directories. Credentials revoked, access paths collapsing one by one. A network that had taken years to grow unraveled in minutes, not because of force, because it had been seen. The colonel turned back to her. What happens now? She considered the question. Now, she said, the system heals. Slowly, painfully, but honestly. And you? He asked. She looked at him then, really looked at him. You'll write a report, she said. It will be thorough, accurate, and incomplete. He nodded. And your name? She shook her head. Doesn't matter. It does to me, he said. She gave a faint smile. That's the difference. The analyst cleared his throat. Sir, Oversight wants a briefing. The colonel straightened. I'll handle it. He paused, then added, I'll tell them the truth. She tilted her head. All of it? No, he said. Enough. She accepted that. Outside the situation room, the base resumed its rhythm. Aircraft fueled, crews rotated, orders executed. Most would never know how close they had come to catastrophe, or how quietly it had been prevented. She gathered her things. Nothing dramatic, nothing ceremonial. Just a tablet, a badge, a jacket. The colonel watched her move toward the door. You could stay, he said. There will be offers. She stopped but didn't turn around. I was never here for a position, she replied. And where will you go, he asked. She thought for a moment. Somewhere ordinary, she said. That's where the important things hide. She opened the door, then paused. One more thing, she said. The colonel waited. Next time a system fails, she said calmly, don't ask who made the mistake. She glanced back at him, eyes steady. Ask who noticed first. Then she was gone. The door closed softly behind her. The analyst sat back in his chair, exhausted. Sir, do people like her come back? The colonel looked at the empty doorway. They never really leave, he said. They just step out of sight. Hours later, as the sun dipped low and the base settled into evening, a training jet lifted cleanly into the sky. No failures, no anomalies, no forgotten commands required, just quiet competence doing its job. Some heroes don't wear rank, some victories never make the news, and some of the most important people in the world work very hard to make sure you never know their names. If stories like this matter to you, stories about quiet service, unseen sacrifice, and the people who hold the line without asking for recognition, subscribe to Mindfront, because the next story is already happening.